As we for sure wanted to dive slightly deeper this time into light settings and cool things that could be borrowed from filmmakers, it could be worth talking about what kind of modifiers can be applied to our lights to get a nice balance of softness and pointiness. As we make our lights bigger, they get softer, and vice versa. The smaller lights, the harsher lights. Okay, we know that already. That is the most obvious way to control the shadow gradients, changing the size of the lamp itself. What other options do we have that may help imitate more sophisticated real-world light modifiers? Well, within the light source settings, there are a few things to be tweaked. For example, the shape of the source. The shape changes though, whether it's a disc or the default square, don't make a big difference to the way shadow gradients are drawn. It'll probably show up in reflections, but other than that, nothing spectacular. Maybe we could be adjusting its spread to focus the beam, which resembles putting on the honeycomb grid. But here in Blender it also affects the shadow gradient, which makes it change its softness. So that is yet another option that could have a fairly significant effect on the light softness. But what if we wanted to imitate light flags or softboxes often used in filmmaking or some other type of diffusion? What we can do is obviously use our trusty plane companion. We just need to align it to our light source. The fastest way to do it is to select the plane, then shift-click on our area light, Ctrl-C and copy its location and rotation as well. The scale can be set manually though. In my previous tests I ended up rotating this plane by 180 degrees, otherwise it was flipped. So I'm gonna trust my previous experience. This is our softbox. I'm roughly scaling it to the dimensions of the area light. And then going G and Z 2 times to press it forward like that, so it sits right on top of the light. It is supposed to diffuse the rays coming in from the area light. I'm calling it modifier _01, and that was our key light. The idea is to give it a translucent material simulating a diffusion of some kind. A bleached muslin or a lighter diffusion like a half-soft frost material, you got the point. So a fairly versatile diffusion material in Cycles can be simulated with the help of the mix shader with a translucent BSDF and transparent BSDF plugged in 2 sockets. Then depending on the mix factor between translucency and transparency, it becomes a super light vinyl diffusion or a heavier, I don't know, silk diffusion. It kind of imitates the way the softboxes and other light modifiers work and could have the exciting implications on the shadow softness. What is also interesting, watch how the light size and the way it's moved away from or closer to our softbox is affecting the shape of the hotspot, which in turn affects, how should I call that, the softness pattern. The hotspot in the middle, giving away most of the intensity, can be made blurrier or sharper, opening a can of worms, or rather a huge array of possibilities as for shaping the light. Speaking about the shape, it can still be changed within the light settings, as we have mentioned before. As the hotspot gets smaller, the overlighting pattern becomes a bit more pointy, a bit more crispy, but even then we still have some softness emanating from the blurrier parts of our softbox, depending on its material. And then again, changing the type of diffusion via the mix slider is a deeply interesting and very photographic way of shaping the emission surface. What is fascinating is that this pretty filmic technique can be imitated in Cycles in a pretty faithful way, with great, almost real-time feedback, which I'm sure many filmmakers would enjoy. To sum it up, the way we use our improvised softbox here is mainly to achieve a nice balance of softness and this more focused area in the center, giving off a little bit of crispier shadows at the same time. To drive it home, let's have a look at a simpler example though. Ta-da! This uniform light plane has a perfect undisturbed softness due to each point of its surface radiating light, so it's as soft and rappy as it gets at this size of the light. Watch the transition on our stony sphere and on the floor, sometimes it's called the shadow terminator. Shifting the light towards the center leads to tightening of the shadow gradient. Notice how the side of the sphere which is close to the source got some extra intensity, and then the light falls off more abruptly here. The whole vibe is not as ambient as it used to be. The shadows got tightened up. Some finer details like these crevices in the ground have been picked up. All of this due to a small change in the light shape, really. It can be pretty tricky to put into words. I hope you can feel the difference. Making this flag a bit transparent, not to be mistaken with translucency, makes the shadows even crispier if the light source behind the modifier is relatively small. So this is basically our Blender version of half soft frost fabric, like a shower curtain or something, letting some part of the beam to pass through and giving the other part the Gaussian blur. It is neither soft nor harsh, but if you make it even more transparent, it starts to lean towards the harsher side. So it's kind of gradient of softening options going on. The takeaway tip from this section could be this, I guess. Shaping light with physically plausible modifiers in Blender, such as any kind of semi-translucent stuff, is an interesting way to change one of its main characteristics, softness, which is a major part of the look. Although it can be quite taxing in terms of computer resources for rendering this fairly advanced stuff, it's definitely worth experimenting with, I think, especially if you feel a bit nerdy about these things.